Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we have now entered day 82 of the ongoing war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. And today, I'm going to start off near Kharkov. Obviously, I have that pulled up on my map. Again, just please note that this is not an entirely accurate portrayal or force disposition of Ukrainian forces, but it does give you an idea of relatively what is happening on the ground. And as we know, the Ukrainians have continued counteroffensive operations, and at some points, they have pushed all the way to the shared border with the Russian Federation. We can confirm through photographic evidence that would indicate that indeed Ukrainian forces are now up towards the border area of the shared border. These forces appear to be territorial defense units, which leads me to believe that the Ukrainians have started to pivot forces in the direction towards Izum. And that would entail, in all probability, elements of the 92nd Mechanized Brigade, supporting elements of the 72nd Mechanized Brigade, and in all probability, units of the 46th Air Assault Brigade should start to launch operations pushing Russian forces back towards Izum and threatening the ongoing Russian offensive that is taking place south of Izum. So if the Ukrainian plan were to pan out, we would see multiple brigades of Ukrainian forces pressing along the R7 and coming down along the E40, with the goal in terms of pushing along R7 is to eventually cut off Russian forces that are operating south of Izum. And we do know that Russian forces have been moved from the ongoing offensive near Izum, just south of Izum in this locale, and have been brought back up in holding forces to prevent this ongoing Ukrainian offensive, which is pivoting from running along the E105 right in this area in the territory that runs along the Ukrainian-Russian shared border to these regular units and special operations units, and in all probability National Guard units as well. Again, pivoting and shooting down and attempting to cut off Russian forces and threaten the large Russian battle group that is operating near Izum. Now, this is just a component of the total force construct. You kind of have three different areas where the Russians are looking at quite possibly assaulting and pocketing these 12 maneuver brigades of Ukrainian forces, in which could become the Kramatorsk, Slavyansk pocket. Further to the east, you have very large formations of Russian forces continuing to assault Severodonetsk. They continue to pound the area with heavy artillery, and we do know that some of these Ukrainian units that are positioned in the town of Severodonetsk are indeed fatigued, battle-worn out, and obviously have sustained fairly significant casualties in the ongoing Russian operation. Further to the southeast, near Popasnaya, we do know the Russians have had some more success in terms of continuing to extend this salient, with the goal of eventually moving up towards Severodonetsk and threatening Severodonetsk from the rear, while at the same time attempting to extend the salient up and eventually meet up with Russian forces coming down from Izum. But again, the Ukrainian offensive to the northwest near Kharkiv is kind of threatening that operation that is taking place near Izum. I hope that makes some sense for you, the viewer. The Ukrainians continue to maintain relatively stable lines The Ukrainians are having more success in terms of fielding and deploying manpower. It sounds like right now that, this is coming from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, that the end-state manpower goal for the ongoing conflict is to get right to about 1 million personnel. That is a very large force construct that the Ukrainian state is looking at fielding. Again, 1 million personnel is the end goal for Ukrainian recruitment in terms of full mobilization. Right now, fielded manpower we estimate are anywhere between 3 to 500,000 personnel when you take into account both territorial defenses, National Guard, regular Army unit, recalled reservist Army units as well. So a very, very large force, making it incredibly challenging for the Russian ongoing operation. Because obviously, if the Russians were not facing such stiff resistance, we would indeed see more territory being claimed by the Russians and more cities being taken by Russian forces. But because of the Ukrainian mobilization, and more importantly, as I've talked about before, because of direct Western assistance, both in intelligence, the number one factor, real-time intelligence, and then obviously the weapons deliveries that are continuing to be delivered to Ukrainian forces is making this a very, very difficult operation for Russian forces. We do understand that the Russian recruitment infrastructure is still intact. The ability for Russian forces to recruit, train, and field elements of such as the airborne forces. They are still recruiting, they're still training, and they are still fielding units. At times, they are having to take units that have been damaged, merge them into different units, and then create new units out of some of those damaged units that are currently exist in the ongoing conflict. But again, we're watching what's happening very closely. The Russians have to be concerned about what is happening near Kharkiv, especially the possibility of this new push by Ukrainian forces down the R7, and I'll just kind of zoom in here where you, the viewer, can see a little bit better what I'm talking about. So again, the whole design behind this Ukrainian operation is to push kind of south by southeast and threaten this ongoing operation near Izum. And I think the whole intent, if they can break up the offensive out of Izum, and that in itself will eventually, according to the Ukrainians, eventually break up these other offensives that are taking place near Severodonetsk in this area, and then obviously the operation that is going on near Popasnaya in areas south of Popasnaya as well. Some other news. The forces of Novorossiya, the Russian backed separatists, have thus far reported that they have lost in terms of manpower 1,700 members of that fighting force, and up to 5,000 to 7,000 members wounded. That is a significant amount of forces that have been killed in action or wounded, considering the size of that force that was fielded. Now, we haven't had a lot of updates from Russia, nor have we had a lot of updates from the Ukrainians in terms of casualties taking place. But believe it or not, one of the most up-to-date sources are coming from one of the Novorossiya factions that continue to launch operations against Ukrainian forces. And we'll continue to watch that, and again, haven't received a lot of updates from neither the Ukrainians nor the Russians. The Ukrainians tend to report more on Russian casualties and the amounts of equipment destroyed by Ukrainian forces, but we have to really take that with a grain of salt. and we're just unsure of what that really looks like in terms of actual casualties being sustained by either the Russians or Ukrainian forces. But we're going to continue to watch very closely what's happening near the Kramatorsk-Sloviansk pocket. We do know even if the Russians push towards Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, they have fortified, meaning the Ukrainians have fortified both Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, and that is going to be a very, very difficult nut for the Russian forces to crack. They're going to have to really envelop these two cities, surround it, cut it off from supplies, and then kill those forces, that force construct that is in Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. And that's only going to really happen if the Russians are able to completely envelop this pocket. And thus far, they have not been successful in their abilities to do that. While this is going on, I wouldn't be surprised if we see additional Russian operations towards Mykolaiv, or quite possibly more towards Zaporizhia or Kryvyi Rih up here in these two locales as well. The Russians are going to have to find a way to alleviate the defense capacity of Ukrainian forces to deploy more and more forces internally towards this area of operation, towards the southeastern Donbass area. And the Russians are only going to really be able to do that two ways. One, through air interdiction, and the Russians continue to struggle with adequate air-to-surface interdiction in terms of Ukrainian forces maneuvering and being transported to various areas within the conflict. Or the Russians are going to have to look to launch additional offensive operations in the south in an attempt to alleviate the continued deployment of Ukrainian forces in the east. The Russians could find themselves fairly rapidly outnumbered in terms of the amounts of Ukrainian forces that are being mobilized and then deployed into the southeastern Donbass area of operations. Now, with that being said, the Russians still continue to effectively use large amounts of artillery, cruise missiles, and long-range guided rocket systems against Ukrainian forces, causing significant casualties to Ukrainian forces. We do know there was a shakeup within the Ukrainian territorial defense forces, and could that be because of the casualties that are being taken by territorial defenses? We do know that some of these foreign volunteer units are very hesitant now about deploying to especially eastern Ukraine in some of these combat zones. A lot of these foreign volunteers coming from other nation states who have seen conflict in such areas of Afghanistan, Iraq, are not used to the intensity of the conflict that is taking place, and especially in terms of the vast amounts of heavy artillery. And again, a lot of these foreign volunteers coming from Western countries that may have had some combat experience in Afghanistan and Iraq have never operated in an area where the Allied forces do not have complete air dominance. And in the case, obviously, of eastern Ukraine, they are being attacked with tactical air assets, and more importantly, they are also being attacked with a lot of tube artillery and a lot of long-range guided rockets, which is something that was not experienced in campaigns in Afghanistan in Iraq. So the intensity level is much higher, and the likelihood of sudden death is much increased. That's not to say, obviously, IEDs and insurgent attacks were not a risk, and I don't want to downgrade the level of conflict that those forces faced in Afghanistan and obviously Iraq. but this is another animal unto itself entirety. It is a high-intensity war that has not been seen for many, many decades. Even some of the fighting that's taking place in Mosul, obviously ISIS did not have large amounts of heavy tube artillery. They did not possess Su-25 Frogfoots, Su-24, Su-34s, cruise missiles that could strike targets on very, very short notice. They did have some limited drone capacity and obviously vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices, but again, not the same thing in terms of what they are dealing with right now in this conflict, and that is leading to quite a few of them to pack their bags and head back west in terms of because of what they are experiencing. But that's kind of where we set for today, and we will continue to watch what is happening very, very closely on the ground and bring you, the viewer, content for your consumption. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day.